Hi everyone, thanks for your patience, and as I said before, welcome to this webinar for the new features of 3D Repo. I'm Andrew Norrie, I'm the Commercial Director at 3D Repo, and today I'm joined by Matthew Osment, who's our Head of Digital Twins, and Bogdan Davidoff, our Customer Success Manager. And we'll be running you through some of the new features that we've been developing over the past 3 or 4 months. I think there's been 2 releases included in this webinar today. Just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We are using GoToWebinar today, as you've probably seen. So there is a questions panel in the GoToWebinar panel. Do please keep those questions coming in as we're going through. We're going to be starting off with an introduction for myself, just introducing the platform, as I do think we've got quite a few people looking at the list who don't use 3D Repo at the moment on here as well. So we'll kind of introduce where we come from and what we do to start off with. And then Matt will be taking over as an initial presentation, looking at a few of the new features, and we'll stop some questions after that, and then we'll hand over to Bogdan. I think that's the right way around. We will have a few polls as we go through. I'll be starting off with the first poll after my section, and then there'll be some more to follow. And yeah, keep the questions coming in, and we'll run a Q&A session at the end. So let me share my screen. So hopefully that's coming through all right. Can someone confirm for me? Yep, looks good. Okay, perfect. Okay, so 3D Repo, just a really quick introduction to what we do. So we're a digital platform for helping you manage your BIM data. We're not a common data environment, we do link to common data environments. So we provide that specialist area for helping you access and collaborate on your BIM models and the data that's held within them. We founded the company for a number of key reasons. The first one being that BIM software was far too complex. So Revit, Navisworks, AutoCAD, great tools for the people that use them, but that's only a very small percentage of any construction project. So 3D Repo aims to sit there and become the conduit to get that data out to everyone and get everyone collaborating. And if we don't, what we found is that BIM actually creates knowledge silos of people who have access to the BIM tools and people who don't. We also note that interoperability is really hard, going from different tools, AutoCAD to Revit, Bentley. How do we move data back and forth? 3D Repo aims to sit in the middle of all of that and give easy access, not necessarily to the whole project, but just to the piece of data that you need to do your job. And we also believe that all data should be accessible without proprietary data lock-in. So 3D Repo doesn't store its data as proprietary formats. It's all open source data formats that you can access that piece of information that you need, no matter what tool you're going to put it into. And finally, we note that every project is different. So 3D Repo is 95% open source software and has open APIs available to all of our users to access any piece of functionality in the platform. And it's the same APIs that we use in-house as well for developing our tools. So the platform itself sits in the cloud. It's a number of servers that process and manage and store your BIM data. You upload 3D models from your favorite BIM tools. We process it, store it, optimize it, and then serve it up in a number of products. So the main product is 3D Repo IO, which is the one we'll be talking about the new features of mainly today. So this is a cloud-based tool for bringing together your models, viewing them and managing that data and pulling it out. We do have another tool called PlanBase, which is specifically focused on making those tools publicly available for community engagement at the planning phase. And there is our free 3D Send tool, which is used for sending 3D models back and forth. So you can use it kind of like a WeTransfer for BIM. The advantage being that if I send you a Revit file, you can download it and use it in Revit, but you can also view it directly in the web browser. And finally, not something that I think we'll be covering too much today, but we do have links out to the major gaming platforms in Unity and Unreal for creating live digital twins that are linked to the cloud, so that your assets can always update and your digital twin is constantly updating as your models do. So all of this is underpinned by our API. This allows us to integrate with many other things, something that we'll be showing a lot of today with our new 4D API feature. and how we can pull in 4D or planning information into the 3D model and link it up. In terms of data consumption, we have plugins for the Autodesk suite of tools, Civils 3D being the latest one, which is one of the new features we'll be talking about today. You can also directly upload a number of files, including Revit and Bentley DGN directly to the platform. But the bit that we're most excited about probably is our direct links via CDEs, and using those CDEs to keep everything in sync so that we don't have our model collaboration platform being something that sits off to the side of what we're doing with our official CDE on a project. So this is 3D Repo. When you log in, really clean, nice model viewer, federate models together, allows you to wander around them and run different types of analysis. And then within 3D Repo IO, we have a number of tools that you can use around issue tracking and safety, and then pulling that into analytics, and then some tools to analyze your models in Instant Clash and 3D Diff, as well as setting up data validation rules. In terms of security, we have all the ISO 9001 and 27001 certificates and Cyber Essentials certified. The platform is completely developed in the UK by our UK London-based development team, and all of your data is encrypted, whether it's at rest or in transit. In terms of hosting, 3D Repo by default is hosted in London on AWS, but we do have a separate setup in Montreal for any of our North American customers. But we can also spin up 3D Repo very quickly on any private cloud situation or even on premise. Okay, so I think that's enough from me. I'm just going to pull up our first poll of the day, which is just to find out who everyone is on the call and if you are actually current 3D Repo users or not. So this is whether you're on a commercial version, a free version, not, or if you're maybe looking to do so in the future. So that poll's now open. If we can just take a few minutes answering that while we just switch over. Who is going next, guys? Is it you, Matt?
It's me, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So I'm going to make you the presenter now. Okay. I think then, Matt, I'll close the poll now and we can hand over to you to get started on the next section.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully that's sharing the right screen now. Can everyone see my presentation, Andrew?
Yeah, looks good. Well, okay. Actually, it's sharing your presenter mode view. Sorry.
Oh, okay. 1 second.
You just need to pick the other screen.
Sorry, there we go. Right, that should be better.
Yeah.
Okay, is that better? Okay, perfect. Sorry about that, guys. It's always a trouble when you're getting into the presentation side. So I'm Matthew Osmond. I'm the product manager at 3D Repo. Those of you who've been on other calls have seen me every time we do one of these updates. So I'm going to run through the feature updates in 3D Repo for June. If my presentation allows me to go to the next slide. Okay, great. So a quick overview of what we're going to run through. We're going to run through support for AutoCAD and Civil 3D. We're going to look at shapes, which we now allow you to attach to issues and risks. Then we're going to look at some integrations. I know quite a few people are starting to use our integration stuff on a few different platforms. So we're going to dive into a bit more about that. Then we're going to look at the 4D API, which is something that sort of spun out of the white paper that I'll also talk about later today. And then Bogdan's going to jump in with, Bogdan's our customer success manager. He's going to jump in with all the stuff we've done in 3D Repo, the product improvements based on feedback, based on sort of quality of life stuff. So I'll hand over to him once we've had a few questions based on the stuff I present. So jumping straight into it, let's take a look at the plugins. So those of you who use 3D Repo probably know that we have Autodesk and Revit and Navisworks plugins. So they're available on the Autodesk App Store. You download them, they allow you to upload models and track issues and risks inside Revit and Navisworks. So we're now adding to that with Autodesk Civil 3D, and anyone that uses Autodesk Civil 3D probably knows how interrelated it is. It's basically a layer on top of AutoCAD. So the great thing for us as plugin developers means that we develop the plugin for Civil 3D, we get the plugin for AutoCAD. So what that's going to mean is you can publish your models from Civil 3D, you can track 3D repo issues and risks, and I'll show you that in a second. And all of those things sync immediately to the web. As Andrew mentioned, 3D repo sitting up there in the cloud, either in our cloud or in your own personal cloud or on premise, and you can sync issues and health and safety risks directly from your models to that cloud. So just to run through what that looks like in practice. So this is Civil 3D. We've got an airport terminal here. We're going to open up the publish plugin for 3D Repo. We select our team space, we select our model and our project, and then into there we just type in a revision number. So for those of you that, again, use 3D Repo, revisions stack on top of each other, so the same model can have multiple revisions going in. Hit upload, you'll notice we've got that level of detail drop down there, because if you've used the parametric modeling of Civil 3D, you can drop your level of detail down, so you can have a more coarse model if you decide that you've got a lot of rounded edges that you don't really need and it's going to slow people down when they review the model. You can really speed up the end user applications. So that's what it looks like from a Civil 3D point of view. Then we kick over into 3D Repo, same model, pushed up to 3D Repo, and now you can navigate around it. Those people that aren't really familiar with Civil 3D, I think a lot of people will agree that the AutoCAD suite has some very picky sort of movements and things like that. So you can see issues here. I can zoom in and I can create a new issue in 3D Repo. So for this instance, I'm going to say that the windows are perhaps the wrong size. As soon as I hit submit here, that's going to go to the 3D Repo server, store that issue with a screenshot and the camera viewpoint of the issue. I can assign different users and set a due date if I need to. So for anyone using 3D Repo, they can now interact with that. They can add comments, they can change the status, they can close it out, they can even update the viewpoint. But also, if you're back in Civils 3D, you can open up the issues plugin. You can see the exact same issue that I'd just captured in 3D Repo IO, and you can see the viewpoint. So instantly, you're allowing people that are not familiar with the more complex CAD tools to interact and communicate with the people that are, so that you really close that gap of, rather than documenting everything on a spreadsheet and then sending that spreadsheet to the engineer and then waiting for the engineer to pick it up. You've got this immediate feedback. People can track the progress of change. The other thing we're going to look at is just how quickly and seamless that interaction is. So we're going to use the risks for this. So along with issues, we support health and safety risks using Safety Base inside Civil 3D. So in Civil 3D, I'll raise a new risk potentially related to access. Just add a description in here. You can see that we've got a lot of detail. The Safety Base application was built in partnership with the HSE, so we got a lot of their recommendations around what this schema should look like, and it's heading towards an industry standard schema, so the issues are all recorded. And the great thing about recording issues in a platform like 3D Repo is you bring everyone to the table, so people that maybe aren't familiar with it can interact. And you'll see right now, as soon as I hit that save risk in Civil 3D, it shows up immediately in 3D Repo. You can snap to the viewpoint, and it's really straightforward to share that, and it's immediate. And if you wanted to add a comment in 3D Repo, you would see that show up in Civil 3D. And then finally, as I mentioned before, the icing on the cake is that it's also available in AutoCAD. So if you're an AutoCAD user, the plugin will just install to AutoCAD as well. All the same feature set in there too. So on to our next feature. So issues and risks. Issues and risks is pretty much our bread and butter. It's what a lot of people use 3D Repo for, because it's a great communication tool in the model. It's one thing looking at a model, but for it to be really useful, you need to have that two-way communication. And what we found is that pins that we use in 3D Repo at the minute are great for design management. So if you've got a clash, if you've got a constructability problem, things like that. Pins are great, but if you've got more complex things, if you're going into construction, constructability, health and safety, suddenly a pin, a single point, doesn't communicate as much context as perhaps an area or a line or something like that. And we do have the markups in the images that you store, but we also thought, well, we'll bring those markups into the 3D space. So we allow you to set color, we allow you to set shapes, set the color for the shapes, attach multiple shapes to different issues. So I'll show you that in action. So again, inside 3D Repo, we've got our issues card up. We can add a new issue. And then we'll add a pin for good measure, just so that people can click and find the issue in the first instance, because the pins in 3D Repo are clickable. So if I click any pin, it will take me to the issue. Then I'm going to draw a shape for the access hatch, and then perhaps some edge protection lines, because if we've got the access hatch, we need to have edge protection. And it's a great way of communicating that so that anyone else looking at the model can see these shapes in space. And you'll see as I move around the model, you'll see that they sort of stick in space. So when I click the issue, up come the shapes that are attached. So anyone looking at that issue can now see the detail that I've attached to that. I can come in and update them. So I can remove an existing one. Let's say I drew it a bit too big, come in and update it and draw it a bit smaller. You can change the colors as well while you're in there. And now that I've got a few different issues, I can click through them and see the shapes associated with each one. So again, rather than just having a pin, I'm really showing off all of the detail. So in this instance, I'm saying that certain rooms require underfloor heating, or that certain ceilings require soundproofing. So you can see how much more useful that is than the pins. And then I can skip through all my different issues one by one and see them light up with the shapes. So that's shapes. It applies to both issues and health and safety-based risks. For those of you that have used our 4D sequencing tools, you'll know that our issues and risks interact with the 4D sequencing so that you can raise time-sensitive issues and risks on your 4D process. The exact same thing is true of our shapes. So when you're in a 4D sequence, you can select it, play it back through again. Again, anyone who's been on some of these webinars before has seen this 4D sequence quite a few times now, but it's nice and simple and straightforward to demonstrate. So it's our sort of favorite one to use. So we've got the columns going up with the beams and the and what I'm going to do is, perhaps I'm in a 3-week look ahead meeting, perhaps I am a subcontractor and I'm saying, well, hang on a minute, the crane base there, you can see that that crane is not reaching far enough to install those far beams and columns. So what if we move the crane base to here? And then we draw a line just to make it clear that we're saying, okay, this crane base goes to here. So it's just continually adding context. And now when someone reviews this this issue, sorry, they can understand exactly what that subcontractor meant when they were saying, oh, we need to move the crane base, because if they just said we need to move it, it's not enough context. And as we go back in time, you can see that the crane base, the particular markup is removed, same way that the pins hide and show in the sequence. And when we add an end date to this particular issue, as we flick back through the sequence, just change the step interval so it's a bit quicker. As we play back through the sequence, you can see that that markup is going to disappear in line with when I told it to, so that you're taking 4D and you're really adding a level of communication to it that you can't get when it's just a video. And when you're using it for all these extra use cases, which I'm going to talk through in a second, it makes it really powerful. So on to integrations. We talk a lot about, so the other two features that we've talked about are very much user interface style stuff, things that people want to use inside the platform. Novice users can use them without any real setup. The next two features are more of what we call our sort of power features. So that's when you're looking at big projects, you want to do integration to really save time. especially when you've got sort of resource shortages, you're unable to get the staff that have got the correct skills. So we need to look at automating as much as possible so that we can reduce our reliance on resource that's expensive. So we've recently released an update for our Logic Apps connections with Power Automate as well, that allow you to upload unlimited or up to a gigabyte size models to 3D Repo. And we've also released a connector on the Workato community store, which is also linked to the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So we're talking with Autodesk at the moment to get it put on their store as well. And what that's great for is that because Workato and Autodesk have the BIM 360 connectors already built in, you can take those BIM 360 connectors, and as you can see on the right-hand side, you can take a model from BIM 360 and push it straight to 3D Repo automatically. You can either do that daily or weekly, go catch all of your models that have been uploaded, or you can do it as and when the models are uploaded, because the BIM 360 action can be a trigger. So when someone uploads a model to BIM 360, Workato is going to get that message and then immediately say, great, I'm going to grab that and I'm going to put it in 3D Repo. We're focusing mostly on model upload at the minute because that's what a lot of our customers are asking for. But in 3D Repo, we have 200 API endpoints that you can pretty much do whatever you like with inside the bounds of what 3D Repo can do. So you could start to say, when I've got an issue in SharePoint, I want to push that into 3D Repo using Power Automate. Or when I upload a model to a site, because a site also has a Power Automate and Logic Apps connector, when I upload a model to a site, I want that to show up to 3D Repo as well. So really automating that process, as Andrew mentioned, it allows us to stay in process. You can keep your CDE intact, you keep all that process intact, but still reap the benefits of using 3D Repo. So on to 4D. Last week we released a 4D white paper based on 4D. We got a lot of good feedback from our Digital Twins white paper. So in this white paper, with the help of James Bowles from Freeform, who do a lot of 4D consultancy, we're looking at what 4D is, where it's heading towards, because at the minute we are sort of constraining ourselves quite a lot in having 4D used mostly on the planning side. But what happens if we start to use it during the construction phase, as built, and even during facilities management? So there's a lot of potential there. I've got the URL there to download it, or alternatively, we've attached it inside the handouts for this webinar. So if you go into the GoToWebinar panel, you should see a handouts option, and in there's a PDF. You can download it and read through the 4D white paper. So talking about what 4D is versus what it's typically used for. So 4D is simply the visualization of time against a 3D model. Now, in the industry, we mostly use that for tendering and project planning, with the problem being that it's immediately kind of out of date. Once we start constructing, that fancy 4D model that we used for tendering or for initial setup is no longer sort of accurate. And so how can we continue to keep an accurate 4D model that helps everyone on site understand what's going on without the burden of the process and the resource that it takes? So some of those options are, we could use 4D for short-term planning. We could use it to automate as-built models, which are really handy for understanding what got built when, especially when you move down into the sort of claims end of things. Hopefully, sort of the elephant in the room that we hope there's no claims, but there are always claims. So what a great way to have all your information organized. Obviously, we talked about health and safety. That's a really big point for us. We feel like having 4D with a 3D model can really help highlight health and safety risks and help mitigate them and help mitigate incidents. Obviously, modern methods of construction are pushing us more towards a factory model, more like traditional automotive and things like that, where things are more predictable and more repeatable. And then obviously sustainability is a big question here. If we can reduce the number of actions on site that need to take place in order to install or construct a particular element, then we'll save on carbon and things like that. So current 4D process, and the reason why it's slightly troublesome, is that first of all, you need a 3D model. Then you need to link that up to a program, which is often created in a separate piece of software. Then you need to get that on a computer. You need to find someone who can operate that computer and that software. Then you need to give them an awful lot of time and then the output is often already too late, because if that process takes a week to get it ready, by the time you've got it ready, you've got to go create another one, and that handle turning, that process, is really holding up the progression of 4D. So what we looked at 3D Repo is we've already got our safety-based 4D. It's being used on a few different projects, most notably on HS2 with Balfour VT Vinci, and we're tracking health and safety risks against the model. So that's great from a project setup point of view. We can track all those risks. They don't tend to change too much. Even if the sequence changes, the risks tend to stay regardless. A few of them might appear or disappear depending on changes to the program. And then we'll look at the constraints that we've got at the minute. So at the minute, the 4D sequencing in 3D Repo requires you to take a synchro model that's been produced by a human and push that into 3D Repo. Now, there are a lot of different planning tools that you could use on the market. So you could use P6, you could use Power Project, you could use Microsoft Project or Smartsheet or any other web-based tools. So we've started to look at how can we open up our API to allow you to publish information from those platforms into 3D Repo. We're already working with Alicosoft, the developers of Power Project, on a plugin there so that you can take 4D from Power Project straight into 3D Repo. And for those of you that use that, you'll know that it's a slightly cheaper option and sort of more robust from a planning point of view. So we're not going out of the process on planning. Then we're looking at site update tools. So what if, as well as your plan, you get your as-built in? And the best way to get your as-built in is to take your information that you're recording in the field using perhaps every file or a site and immediately push that into your 4D model. Or alternatively, if you want to start to get creative, you can use Excel or SharePoint or some more modern SaaS platforms. We know a few of our customers are using Airtable, or you could use Trello or something like that. You could link that up with our API and publish that information to 3D immediately. So I'm not going to lie, none of this is out of the box. We give you our API tools, and you can develop your own processes and integrations using our toolkit. But typically, if you want to create an integration from Excel to 3D Repo, it could take anywhere from half a day to a couple of days. And if you think that process could then save you a whole resource throughout the lifetime of a project, it's really worth doing. And if you start to look at, we're working on a few projects where we're using big projects in London, where we're using the same steel contractor and the same facade contractor, and their processes with regards to production and installation are exactly the same. So once we've created this integration once for one project, the likelihood is we'll be able to use it again for other ones, even if it needs a slight tweak. So what can we do with this? We can record progress into a 4D model automatically. We can look at logistics planning based on delivery schedules. So if we know when materials are coming to site, we can illuminate the relevant aspects of the model based on which materials have arrived. We can take our hands off the 4D process, so we can try and automate it as much as possible. We can look at post-construction, how we deal with servicing schedules for digital twins, things like that, and short-term look-aheads. So when you're doing those 3-week look-aheads or 4-week or 6-week look-aheads, after you've come out of that meeting, you want the information that was created in that meeting to be available to everyone on the project as soon as possible. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is with some form of automation or integration. So I'm going to take the rare moment here. I know the rest of this has been videos, but now we're going to switch over to a live demo just so I can show you this working. So over on the left here, I'm going to get up 3D Repo. I thought I already had this loaded, but evidently not. So on the left, I've got a schedule of steel columns. And you'll notice that there isn't any particular identifying mark or complicated unique identifier for the BIM model. All I've got is grid references and location and profile. And as long as I've got those three things and those things are present in the model, I can create an integration that highlights the relevant aspects as I cross them off in my Excel spreadsheet. So get this clinic model up here. Sometimes we have to wait a second for the viewer to load when we're on a webinar because it seems to always slow down and throttle my internet connection. So hopefully it's not going to take too much longer. There we go. Okay, so it's relatively simple model. If I go through to my sequences, I've got this sequence progress here, and you can see I've got one column showing up on the 1st of January, the same here. So it's first floor, A4 location. If I want to come in and I want to say, okay, let's just say that it's going to be that date plus some random number between 0 and 2, just so that I can fill this up. So then if I drag that down. So let's say we were on site, we were marking up progress, and this is our progress to date. We can then submit that. I've got a little script in Excel which goes and compiles that into something 3D Repo can understand, push it to 3D Repo. My upload's complete. If I then go back out of my sequence and back in again, I can play that through, and you can see the additional columns getting installed. And I can even come in and section that off if I want to. And then obviously I can come through and I could pull that all the way down, submit that, and it would immediately show up in 3D Repo for anyone looking at it. So this is a very simple example. Obviously, as I'm sure some of you can appreciate, it's quite complicated to have examples for whole 4D simulations. But as we go forward, we're looking for more and more of our customers who are interested in this sort of thing. We want to team up. We want to look at how we can develop this and how we can help you get your processes into the 3D Repo 4D workflow. So right now, you can go onto the 3D Repo API page on 3drepo.com, have a look at the APIs and start pushing 4D sequences, see what the payload looks like and start pushing 4D sequences to it. Or alternatively, if you've got any interesting ideas about what you want to do with this technology, please drop me an email. It's matthew.osman@3drepo.org, and we can sort of have a chat and see where we go next. So with that, I think we've got enough time for a couple of questions, if any have come in.
Yeah, we've definitely got a few. So the first ones were around Civils 3D. So can we create the issues directly in Civils 3D? I think we ended up answering that, right, by showing the creating of a risk. So yeah, it's completely bi-directional, and you can even chat back and forth between someone that's in there. What objects can be uploaded to the cloud from Civils 3D? At the moment, is it just solids and surfaces?
Yeah, it's solids,
2Ds.
It's solids and surfaces at the moment. We do support 2D in 3D Repo, and Bogdan will show you a little bit of that later coming from Revit. And we are looking at supporting, we are actually very close to supporting DWG natively in 3D Repo as well, where we do support 2D lines too. So at the moment, it's solids and surfaces, but it's on our roadmap to push that towards lines, both from native file upload and from the plugin.
Yep. There's another one. Is Civils 3D used as health and safety site protocols globally yet? Not sure, but I think this is the health and safety stuff is more aimed at the design and pre-construction phase, right? It's more within Civils 3D anyway, to try and design out the risk before we even get to site. So identifying risk during the design phase and trying to reduce that risk through design rather than through on-site measures. Does that make sense to you, Matt?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you provide 3D Repo license? When you get a 3D Repo license, do you have access to the API?
Yes, absolutely. You can go onto 3D Repo, go to your profile and access your API key. And from there, you can do everything based on our API documentation. And you can set the account with your API key to have certain permissions. So you can either set them to view only on models or federations or allow them to write. And that's how we control, making sure that the API key can only do what you want it to do. But yeah, anyone with a 3D Repo account can use the API.
Yeah, just one caveat to that. Yeah, it's on every version, but support for the API is only included on project licenses and enterprise. That's the commercial guy coming out at me. Sorry. Can all issues and risks be imported and exported via BCF?
Issues can. Risks, because they're not as compliant with the BCF schema, it's a little trickier, but you can also use the API and use some of the Power BI templates and things like that online to pull them out into either Excel or Power BI or however you need them. But yeah, we do support BCF in and out for issues.
Yeah. Where clients are using 3D modeling, not Autodesk related, is there a way of integrating this into your software?
Yes, so anyone that's using, I guess that's probably aimed at AutoCAD mostly, I think, and maybe Tekla.
DGN,
Fortunately,
Bentley.
DGN. Oh yes, sorry, Bentley as well. So we do support DGN via a direct model upload, and we also support IFC, which obviously is good for AutoCAD, and Tekla as well. So they're a bit more robust in that sense. So yeah, we can support models authored in any solution, and as Bogdan will show, we're constantly listening to customer feedback. So if there is a platform that you're really into using, let us know, and if we get enough sort of support and demand for it, we will build those connectors there as well.
Yeah. Is there an approvals process within issues?
So you can assign issues to jobs, and people on the job, on the project, will have jobs associated with them, so that you can set certain people to respond to certain issues. And then we have a full audit trail as well, so you can download the audit trail into using the API to see who's changed what and when, to check that the process has been followed accordingly.
Yeah. Two more. Can we view MEP or any component attributes within 3D Repo? I think Bogdan will be covering some of that maybe in attribute viewing.
Yep. Yes, we talk about some more attributes from IFC models, but yes, any attributes that are available to us in the platforms we talk about, you can access in 3D Repo and use them to either just review them for a particular element, or you can use them as part of our smarts group process to say, okay, any element where the type is IFC slab, color it in blue, things like that. So that sort of parameter driven selection.
Yeah. And finally, we spoke about BIM 360 integration. What about ProjectWise 365?
Yep. So ProjectWise also has an API. Fortunately for us, their API is available on the Microsoft Power Automate and Logic Apps platforms. So you can go onto those platforms, you can pull a node in for ProjectWise that says get model, and then you can pull the node in for 3D Repo and say publish model to 3D Repo. So it really is very straightforward to start integrating these platforms now.
Okay, perfect. I think that's all the questions for now, Matt. Thanks very much. We will put up another poll now, so we just want to know a bit more about 4D and if you're using it within your business, and if so, which tool you're using. So I'll just launch that one up now. Any feedback you can give us would be great for that, and we'll hand over to Bogdan.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Matt. That was a really good presentation. Let me just find the right screen to share now.
I'm just making you the presenter now, Bogdan, so you should have control now.
Excellent.
I'm just going to leave it a couple more seconds on this poll, and then we'll hand over to you.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I think probably got enough of that. So thanks very much for your answers there, guys. Really appreciate it. Bogdan, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, here we go. Can you see the screen now?
Yep, looks good.
Excellent, cool. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for attending today's webinar. It was a good presentation to see where 3D Repo is heading in terms of its new features. But I'll present you something different, also about new features, but mainly product improvements. I'll show you how we at 3D Repo continuously working on improving our products. Since we are a customer-oriented product, our customer success team is always gathering as much feedback from our users as we can. And there are loads of improvements that are happening in the background that are making life within the construction coordination process a lot easier for many of the 3D Repo users. So let's jump right into it, and I'll show you what improvements we have in this new features release. Okay, cool. So one of the main ones is the 2D line support for DGNs. So we can now bring in annotations and 3D lines. And that's something to support a number of coordination workflows a lot of our MicroStation users are experiencing. So one of the things that we discovered is that if we look at the 2D DGN use cases, for instance, You might well design a lot of 3D geometry, but quite often when you work on infrastructure projects, you might inherit a lot of information that is 2D. That could be in the drawings, or perhaps you actually generating the model itself, which consists of 2D information only. And for some, it could be a bit time consuming to generate it as 3D as well. So in order to save time, we leverage both options and actually bring it into 3D Repo. So in this use case, I can show you, and you can see, for instance, what you're able to do is you can even pull a federation together consisting of various DGN versions. So some of them could be 3-dimensional, some of them could be annotations, maybe your topography surveys, some of them could be you modeling 2D lines because you don't want to generate too much 3D solid geometry. That could be quite, heavy as a file, or just too much time spent designing it. So in this particular use case, as you can see, when we leverage the two sets of information, and let's say we jump into our perspective mode, so it looks a bit fancy and prettier, and actually look at the model in a helicopter mode, so we can fly through it a little bit better. You'll see that now, unlike previously, where you would only see 3D geometry, we now bring in 2D information. So you can see that that could be your topography survey, your curved lines, your maybe groundworks or anything like that. And it's not just lines, it's also annotation. And the good thing is you can mix and match between different file formats. So it could be you mixing maybe MicroStation DGN with some civil 3D infrastructure files, that could be 3D geometry. It could be you adding 2D information like these power cables, which are great, instead of you modeling, some sort of a complicated tube that is a 3D solid. It's easier to just pull a 2D line. So as you can see in here, this is one of the great improvements we've done for our DGN support. So you can natively upload it on 3D-Repo.io, and you can then, leverage that for a much better design coordination with whoever is designing 3D geometry, or looking at maybe some topographical survey that they might have in DGN file format as well. Okay, so let's move on to the next subject. So speaking of this whole 2D annotation and everything like that, there is a new feature that we're adding, and that's RVT 2D annotation, which is for Revit uploads. So you can now upload floor plans, sections, elevation, any kind of information from your annotated drawings. And that's a really good feature to really help you leverage some of the use cases I'm going to cover now. So one of the predominant use cases, perhaps actually bridging the gap between your 2D and 3D information. Maybe you don't have 3D information available, but you have it in 2D and you want to bring it in and share it with somebody else. But commonly we fall victim to this workflow, especially if somebody publishes drawings from Revit and the next thing we know, they weren't approved, because all of this information should ideally be coming from common data environment, and then people start wasting time trying to align it to 3D models and things. So it's not really ideal. We want to make sure that it is seamless and we work into work in progress environment if we are publishing these 2D annotations such as drawings. So the next use case is the level of detail, right? As we all know, BIM is great, and everybody seems to measure BIM success by being able to go from this to something more detailed, to something even more detailed, and say, hey, look at us, how amazing we are. We're adding more and more detail that looks so realistic. Well, it looks great to you, but it's problematic to 90% of the team that you're working with, because they don't have powerful laptops, they don't have software licenses, they can't sit and wait for 1 gigabyte Revit file to be downloaded. So what you find with a lot of successful BIM implementations with a lot of our clients that do BIM really well, it's not the ability to add a lot of detail, it's the ability to control it. But at any point in time, you can then step back and then say, we don't need to exchange that much information for this project stage. Well, actually, let's scale it back. We just want to see the outlines, right? Quite often people go off, they download components that are far too detailed, furniture pieces, dishwashers, kitchen units, tables, things like that. And then the next thing they know is it's actually DWG import by manufacturer. So they can't tweak it, right? We can't manipulate the LOD definition. We just end up with the wardrobe that's full of 25 coat hangers. That's just silly, right? So this is how we are able to do that with our plugin. So our plugin allows us to publish 3D geometry and not actually a set of 2D annotation drawings that you might want to see 3D Repo. And like I said, those could be floor plan sections, elevations. In this case, we'll just upload a few floor plans, and I'll show you how they look in 3D Repo. But this is where we are able to bring 2D annotation for us to understand how this project is coordinated and where everything sits. So if we open up our structure and interior federation, we actually have a set of drawings already predefined. And then through those, you can go view by view and then have a look at specific floor layout plans that you've published alongside with the 3D geometry as well. So as you can see in here, we can add extra layer of information without really fucking around too much, trying to align it and figure out where to download it. You know, if you're publishing a model and that's your model with information, just tag along some information that is 2D related. But what's really good, you know, on top of all of this annotation, like grid lines and maybe some sort of markings or anything like that, you can also really help leverage your LOD, right? So for instance, if you did download some fancy furniture, right, and you can't change the level of detail for it, and instead of sending 200 megabyte Revit file, you can actually just send the floor plan, right? You don't have to faff around, drawing around in the model, seeing what the outline is. It's all done for you. Just cut a section, cut a floor plan, upload it, and there you go. You're leveraging information that is just as useful, but the user on the other end doesn't have to spend hours downloading this model, you know, or trying to figure out why is their laptop running so slow. They might not have graphics card, and it's just too much essentially. So this is how it works. And this is super useful, you know. You can tweak it however you like. You can, you know, mix and match it with different disciplines. If you're just a structural engineer and you want to look at the latest, you know, wall layouts from an architect, but you don't want to download 200 megabyte Revit file, or you don't have it, or just don't want your computer to explode running that file, you know, you can just ask them to publish the drawings. So this is one of the really cool workflows that will benefit our users that quite frequently inherit big models, but they can't manipulate them. But those models frequently end up far too detailed and too big. So moving on to the next really cool feature is the Unreal Engine plugin. So we've done some work recently. We published a plugin for Unreal Engine in beta testing, and we had some really good feedback from users. We've done a lot of refinements and improvements, but the next big thing is actually texture support for 3D models, and that's great. Like for instance, we'll see here what I can do is I can actually import a 3D model directly from 3D Repo. So what I do is I utilize 3D Repo plugin code, and just using a single command line, I can actually point to the right model of federation and then download it as an asset into my Unreal Engine. But what's really nice this time is it's not only me saving time, you know, not using some complicated workflows. It's me just going ahead, taking this Revit file, publishing it directly to 3D Repo, and embedding the texture, right? It takes 10 minutes or maybe 5 minutes to export it out of Revit. It will take maybe 20 to 30 minutes to process in 3D Repo servers. But then from then on, it's available for you to use, right? So in half an hour, without too much faffing around, I was able to perhaps create a fancy looking model, bring it into my game, which is the Unreal Engine, and then make use of the actual information that is maybe BIM geometry, but also maybe some fancy textures. And that could be anything. That could be your fancy BIM model. It could be maybe an FBX import with textured, you know, topo survey that you might have in 3D Repo as well. So that's a really cool improvement for our Unreal plugin. Now, moving on to the next thing, it's IFC parameters, right? So the question was raised, oh, can you see data when you click on elements? Of course you do. Since we're working with so many different file formats in 3D Repo, like IFC, Revit, DGN, FBX, Navis, DWG, and just list goes on, right? There are so many different schemas to follow. There's so much data to include. So what we've done recently is we actually improved support for IFC. So as you can see here now, we can bring a lot more parameters from different file formats, from exports coming from things like Tekla or AutoCAD, because we found that sometimes we'll use different schemas. Some things are included and some not. But right now, you know, you're more than welcome to go and log into 3D Repo, start publishing your IFC models, click on elements, and then see all of the BIM data in the BIM card on the side as well. So that's one of the great improvements. So that's great for data and quantity takeoff, so maybe data validation. Moving on to the next thing that is particularly useful as well with this whole development of 4D information in 3D Repo, we've actually done some user experience improvements for our sequences. They're minor, right? They're not like big new feature or anything, but some of the things that we heard from our users once they started using this sequences feature. One of the main ones, as you can see, is, for instance, if you go into your sequence, we can actually manipulate the steps interval, right? We can actually set it to frames, because quite frequently people working on large projects, they might have, you know, time scales where not much changes and they just sat there watching the playback go on. So if we change it to, let's say, frames, now what we can do is we can actually see things that happen rather than sitting there for a week and then thinking, okay, is anything changing or not? I'm just wasting my time here. And another good thing is actually the little legend, sequences legend, right? So what you can do, you can move this thing around, you can perhaps identify what sequence is doing a lot easier this way, so you can see if it's a steel installation or crane lift or something like that. But most importantly, add some custom legends as well. So this way you can actually leverage more information between the 3D and then 2D within your sequences part as well. So that's pretty much it in terms of the more visible improvements. Of course, there's a lot more going on in the background. But perhaps I'll conclude it here because there's a lot of information to take in from this webinar. And if anyone has any questions, maybe let's go ahead and feel free to ask those and I can answer them.
Awesome. Thanks, Bogdan. Matt, are you still there? We've got some more questions come in. Does the Civils, we're back to Civils 3D, does Civils 3D integration support property sets when uploading? So the asset data behind the models. You're on mute, Matt. Still can't hear you.
Sorry about that, guys.
Okay. Bogdan, do you know the answer to that question?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, obviously for 3D geometry. Oh, is he on? No, for 3D geometry.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened with my headphones. Yes, we can read information from property sets, but the problem, well, not the problem, but at 3D Repo, we're specialists in 3D Repo, but we know that there are people out there that know how to use Civils 3D and AutoCAD far, far better than we can. So we're always open to people sharing their models with us and troubleshooting and making sure we're getting absolutely every bit of information that they need from their models into 3D Repo.
Yeah. Can model cutting to reduce LOD? So I guess this means the clipping planes in Revit or in Civils, so they work in Civils as well, would be my question. Can it be done in any direction or only in plan? For example, would be very useful for a road cross section if this is possible.
I guess that might be talking about Bogdan's point on the 2D stuff from Revit.
Right.
So yeah, Bogdan, I don't know if you want to answer this.
Yeah. Like I pointed out, so for instance, in terms of the 3D geometry, what we found is that we do have, let's say, Revit plugin in there. If you model natively in Revit, we're able to manipulate that level of detail. So we can reduce it so it's not such a heavy file. But what we found is that quite often people inherit models or download things from BIM libraries, which are DWGs and fixed assets. So you can't manipulate them anymore. So for instance, what we introduced with this 2D annotation is, like you mentioned, perhaps the ability to take a floor plan instead of the whole solid geometry and just publish that so that we can see the outline of the road. And that's good enough, right? Or for instance, perhaps take a cross section across this bridge and then publish that. And instead of the fully detailed geometry, just publish some sort of solid extrusion. So then if you ever wonder how does it actually looks and how does it actually is built together, you can then jump to that view and then see the full detail annotation across the bridge.
Okay. back to the 4D API, Matt, what model formats can I use for the 4D API process?
So that's one of the benefits of doing 4D and 3D repo, is that we can all the formats and all the ways of getting models in that Andrew mentioned and that Bogdan's talked about and that I've talked about, they're all compatible with the 4D process. So as long as your model is visible in 3D repo, you can start attaching 4D sequences to it. The other thing I should have mentioned before actually is that you can attach multiple sequences to the same model. So you can show different iterations, perhaps some if you're looking at different ways that you might construct different programs, you can add them all to the same model.
And one more, an interesting one, we're using MuleSoft as our integration platform. Can we use this to upload models to 3D Repo?
Yeah, so any online sort of integration platform that supports HTTP, so standard REST APIs, will be able to support 3D Repo. So yeah, if you're using MuleSoft, Integromat, even if you're using Zapier or something like that, you can use 3D Repo. It's just the ones that I mentioned are the ones that we sort of add an extra level of support for, and we sort of tailor make some connectors for. So it's a little bit easier on those ones, but it's certainly possible on the others as well.
Okay. I think we're pretty much coming to the, oh, I've got one here. I'm in BIM management, creating templates for EIR, BP, working with Navisworks and Dynamo. Will 3D Repo help in the working sequence? I think, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but I think the way that I would see it is it could be used for checking the model. So you could use the data validation tools to check that the models contain the data that you required for your employees information requirements or your asset information requirements would be. But if you want to clarify on the question a bit more, happy to answer it. Any more questions get coming in? We do have one more poll just to find out which one of the features was your favorite for today. So I'm just going to launch that up while we're waiting for any more questions to come in. And while we're doing that, just a reminder that 3D Repo do have a free version. So anyone that does want to have a go with any of this, please do sign up 3drepo.com. You can get a free account. It's not limited to any time, it's just limited to the model size. And if you are interested in discussing further around pilots and licensing, please do drop us an email, sales@3drepo.com, and one of the guys will get in touch with you to discuss your requirements. Okay, one more question, Matt. Can I link my CDE to 3D Repo to upload models based on approvals?
Yeah, well, the caveat is as long as your CDE has the appropriate APIs to do that. But I think in this day and age, any CDE that's worth its salt has APIs. So yes, you can either run a weekly, potentially, or even daily process that goes and checks if there's any new models that satisfy certain criteria and push them to 3D Repo. So the ones that we know that works with are ProjectWise, ASite, I believe AConnect, but pretty much any of the other ones should be able to as well.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Guys, just a reminder as well, the handout for the 4D white paper breaking down the barriers is available as a download within the GoToWebinar screen. If you want to grab that, feel free to. But I think for now, that brings us to the end of our webinar. If you do have any more questions, as I said, you can send them through to support@3drepo.com. But yeah, thanks very much, and yeah, look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks very much, Matt. Thanks, Bogdan. Great presentations as always. Really good.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good day. Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye.